The idea, insight, or secret you need for massive impact is just moments away. It's time to claim your career crown. The podcast where business owners and entrepreneurs share the keys to the kingdom to help you open the vault to your greater success. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Petite to Queen's Claim Your Career Crown podcast. I'm your joyful sales queen, Lynn Whitbeck, and today I'm joined by our wonderful guest, Wanda Allen. And we're going to be talking about how follow-up strategy can boost success. Getting results is what drives your business and enables you to help and serve more people. So if you get a ton of value out of this episode, I'd love to invite you to subscribe because, it costs nothing to subscribe. Woohoo! So I want to tell you about Wanda. Wanda is an international speaker, coach, and corporate trainer. She's also the author of Follow-Up Savvy and Follow-Up Sales Strategies. Wanda had a 25-year corporate career in various sales-related areas where she held the position of senior vice president for 15 years. Now, after leaving corporate, Wanda followed her business and she founded, I should say, I'm not sure what I said, cold brain. She founded her business, Follow-Up Sales Strategies. She's an expert in helping entrepreneurs, business owners, and sales professionals increase pipelines, improve sales performance, and strengthen relationships by developing strong follow-up skills. What Wanda teaches is tried, tested, and proven. And I am so thrilled to have you on the show today, Wanda. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, let's just dive in because, after your corporate career, I'd really like to hear what inspired you to create your business, Follow-Up Sales Strategies, and, really what was that momentum to get started?
Yeah. So when the bank I was working for was acquired, well, let me back that up. Okay, so I spent the bulk of my career managing SBA departments and their government loans, which means they come with a ton of regulations and rules. Well, to manage a good department, I had to develop the skill for creating systems. And so I got a systems brain that was developed. And after managing SBA departments for 15 years, I was asked if I would consider the position of branch manager. And I was ready for a change, so I accepted the position, which put me into sales. And when I studied the sales process, I realized how critical follow-up is. But I thought, how do you do it, though? How do you stay on top of it all? And I fell back on my systems brain. And I developed systems for following up on the prospecting side and then staying in touch once business has been closed. That is known as relationship management, which is an extension of following up. And the bank I was working for was acquired. We were not the lead bank. I was part of senior management. You know how that story ends. So I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew banking had run its course in my life. And a friend of mine said, you should teach people how you follow up. And I thought, well, that's crazy. I don't know anything about speaking or coaching. I know a lot about follow-up, but I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a whirl. So I went out on a wing and a prayer and started speaking and learned very quickly that in general, people really struggle in this area. And that was 15 years ago, and here we are today.
Absolutely. And it's so true. Follow-up is one of the number one things that you need to do in sales, and yet so many people truly do struggle with it. So I want to ask you, how do you create your follow-up strategies? And you already said there's a process, so I'd love to hear about this.
Yeah, so what I always say is we got to start with the fundamentals of follow-up. You have to start with the fundamentals in anything. It's been said to be an expert at anything, you have to be a master at the fundamentals. So there's three primary fundamentals. And if one is struggling with their follow-up, it's because they don't have the three fundamentals in place. So because I could teach you the best systems on the planet, but if your fundamentals aren't there, which creates your foundation, by the way, you're not going to be able to sustain the systems. It would just be impossible. So, what are the fundamentals? The first one is mindset. You have to have the right mindset about follow up. The number one reason why people don't do it is because of fear. That's the main issue with mindset. Fear of rejection, fear of being pushy, fear of not knowing what to say, fear of not knowing what they are going to say. And the list goes on and on. So you have to have the right mindset about it. Second fundamental is you got to use the CRM, stands for Customer Relationship Manager. It's just really helps streamline the process. And then the third fundamental, and this sounds so elementary and like such common sense, but it's not very common. You got to make follow-up a priority, and you've got to adhere to your priorities. Follow-up work is very easy not to do. Okay, yeah. Very easy. And but it's detrimental to future business, and it creates chaos in lead generation and booking sale, closing sales. It's not good to put it on low on the task list.
No, I agree with you so much. It's one of my powerful principles is that you have to become a master at follow-up, because people aren't ready to buy immediately. Mm-hmm. Often they need time to get to know you, to get to like you, to get to trust you. And when you're doing the follow-up, it really is showcasing how you're going to show up, that you're credible, that you're going to be there. And it also keeps you top of mind. Yes. And there are so many different things about follow-up. And I really want to remind everybody here that the most important thing is that you are literally going to close more sales when you follow up with your ideal clients. So I just gave one big thing about why follow-up strategies are so important, but you are the expert, so I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so you said it. That's the bottom line is at the end of the day, if you don't follow up, you are going to lose business. That's just the way it is, and that's the truth. And so if you don't follow up, what happens is you're going to put yourself on that hamster wheel. Yeah. Because here's what happens. People work so hard at getting leads. But that takes time, energy, effort, money a lot of times, if you're networking and that's how you're getting your leads. But they fall so short on the follow-up side that what happens is they'll get a lead, follow up twice, the prospect doesn't respond and they just let it go. And then they have to go get another lead and follow up twice and the prospect doesn't respond and they let it go. And that's where the hamster wheel shows up. And that pains me because people work so hard in lead generation. But if you will just commit to your follow-up responsibilities, you're going to close so much more business. You said it, and research tells us 90% of people quit after 2 times.
I know.
If you're in what I call the elite 10% that's willing and able to make 3 or more contacts, that's a very low bar, by the way. There's so much business for you out there because people don't do it. And
essentially, you're giving, when you don't follow up, you're giving that business to your competitors.
Yes. Yeah. You know what you're doing? That I call it, you're prepping the prospect for your competitor, because you go in and you educate them and you talk to them about the service or the product, and then you don't follow it, maybe follow it once or twice and the prospect isn't ready yet and you stop. Well, when they are ready and they're going to say, what was her name, Lynn or Linda or Leslie, and they're gonna, I can't find your contact information, and the next person they meet that does what you do is going to get the business.
Yeah. So you touched on some of the reasons sales professionals overlook follow-up strategies, especially around that fear. But let's say you're bold and brash and you're not afraid of the no. And I always want to remind everybody, no is a no for now, not rarely is it a no forever. But what would you say to what are some of those other reasons that sales professionals simply, fall down on their face and don't do their follow-up?
Yeah, because they don't have order and organization. That's really what it is. You have to. Now, we're all wired differently, okay? And some people are more naturally organized than others. And so if you're not a naturally organized person, you really need to have processes, systems, routines, they all mean the same thing, in place. Because if you don't, you're going to lose business. The fur never stops flying when it becomes chaotic. And that's a really difficult environment in which to live. And so you want to, I think this crazed frenzy that we all live in has desensitized people to inefficiencies.
Yeah.
So the norm is to go 100 miles an hour in 10 different directions every day. And that it gets exhausting. It wears you out, and that's where things slip through the cracks. So by getting a CRM or some kind of system in place, that's first and foremost. Because let me tell you, when you don't have a system in place, you're writing information down on the back of their business card, on a sticky note, on a spiral piece of paper. You're storing it in your memory bank, which is very unreliable. And that's how chaos kicks in.
Yeah.
So chaos opens the door wide for inefficiencies, and they're so costly. They're going to hit you in your bottom line.
Yeah. I call it the cyclone of chaos calamity. You know? And it is so true. And you don't need some super elaborate CRM. You can use a Google Sheet, right?
Yeah.
And depending on your business, right? It really has to suit you and your business. And eventually, you'll get there. But the first thing is to have that process. So let's talk about the challenge of creating that process and creating an effective follow-up strategy.
Yeah. Well, you just have to be committed to it. Okay. You've got to be, and that sounds elementary, but you have to be committed. You also have to make the time for it. Time is a problem for so many people. And the number one reason why people say they can't get their follow-up work done is because they don't have the time. They just have too much going on. I've heard it a gazillion times. I never believe it. So you need to be committed. You need to make the time for it. How do you make the time for it? It's top priority work, and you do your top priority work before you do anything else. Yeah. What happens, and I find that those who consistently have a shortage of time are the ones who waste the most. And how do they waste their time? They waste all day on low priority, busy work. And then they get to the end of the day and say, oh, shoot, now I don't have time to get that follow-up work done, and it's time's fault. When, that's not the case. So why do so many people waste their days on low priority, busy work? Because that's the comfortable work. And our human nature is to gravitate towards comfort. So be committed. Make the time, get your top priority work done first, and get some kind of system in place so you're going to one place and one place only for the information you need to get your follow-up work done and take care of your relationships.
Yeah, I love this. So, Wanda, is there a specific strategy that you can recommend for someone when they're, sort of building that follow-up cadence or some of the messaging?
Okay, the messaging. So people get tripped up on what to say, right? Well, I don't know what to say, or it's so uncomfortable. I'm going to make it really simple. Say what you mean and ask for what you want. Okay, don't beat around the bush. Don't try to sugarcoat it, because when you do that, you're going to get tongue-tied and twisted. And you don't want to, you're going to be wasting time on fluff, when really you just need to get to the point. Now, this does not mean you're abrasive, rude, or unprofessional. You're professional, you're kind, you're just getting to the point. And we appreciate that. Everyone appreciates that. So how do you do that? Well, you be very, very clear in your mind about the purpose of your phone call, email, or text. If you're following up to see if they've made a decision, that's what you're going to say. If you're following up to see if they're ready to book that meeting with you, that's what you're going to say. That is the point. So keep it very, very simple.
Yeah, that's so true. I always say that from my experience at corporate, is that you have to think of, like your boss has the attention span of an amoeba. So the same with your clients, get to the point, but do it in a way that's polite and kind and professional, that's beautiful. Because that way you're not wasting your time with 3 paragraphs and it's buried in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody has, they're skimming, right? And you
Yeah.
just get to it,
Yes. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'd also say is, what is the worst thing that can happen? That they say no. Well,
Yeah.
is that really the worst thing that can happen? I mean, I'm sorry, but there's so many. Just open up the news. There's so many
Yeah.
more things that are the worst thing that could happen. It's that
Yeah.
at least right? And remember, often it's a no for now. Maybe you haven't established the value, haven't built the relationship enough. So there's a lot of different things. So I think that mindset that you discussed is probably the number one piece that people really have to work on.
Yes. And that so many people think the pain is in the no, and that is wrong. The pain is not in the no. The pain is in the ignore. I will take a no over an ignore any day of the week, because when somebody tells me no, I know where they stand. I have my answer. And be okay with it, because not every prospect you talk to is going to want your product or service. Has nothing to do with you. It just either wasn't a good time or a good fit. That's it. And then you move on. So I always say, don't be afraid of the no. It's okay. It's, why? Because when somebody tells me no, it keeps my train moving, and sales is about movement. But if I have a prospect that's ignoring me, that car on my train is an idle, and it is going to slow my train down. So sometimes I say, like, if I'm following up for the 6th time, please just tell me no if you're not going to do it. I would just tell it. We move on. Let's go. But, prospects don't. They're funny. Prospects are funny creatures.
Yeah, and ignoring is one of the easiest passive ways to just, not deal with it. There is another side. I want everyone to remind you, the number one reason why you get ghosted, people are ignoring you, is because they're busy.
Yes.
They're busy. And this is a really good follow-up story I'm going to share, because back in the corporate days, I was pursuing a big program with a big grocery store chain. And I'd had a great conversation. So that meant we were going to move on to the next stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And crickets. Didn't reply to my emails, didn't respond to my voice message. I sent packages. I have a whole cadence that I would do. And so my step 12 of my 13-step Baker dozen process was to send a meeting invitation. And I sent a meeting invitation, which would mean I'd have to fly in for a lunch, and he accepted. Nothing else. I sent emails confirming when I would arrive. Did he have a favorite place that he wanted to go to? Nothing. I heard nothing. I still got on that damn plane. Excuse my French. I got on that plane, showed up. He trotted on down the stairs, and out to lunch we went, and he just said, "Thank you for following up." Yeah. He said, "I really wanted to have this conversation. It's just been one fire after another, but I got to eat." We had a 2.5-hour lunch. I eventually did close that sale.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I didn't take it personally.
Yeah.
That ignoring. So just for everyone out there, it's usually because they're busy.
Yeah. Yes. And what I will promise you is, the more you follow up, when they do finally respond, 2 things will happen. They will apologize for not getting back to you, and they will thank you for following up. Because another thing I can promise you is, the one who follows up is the one who makes the great professional impression. Yeah. And that's the one who gets the business. So you talked earlier about liking, trusting, and knowing. You typically don't know your prospects. They're typically new people in your world. The only way they're going to start trusting you is when you follow up when you're supposed to. And the only way they're going to get to know you is by following up, because that's how they're going to talk to you. And the only way they're going to like you is when they get to know you.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got to do what you say you're going to do.
Yes. Yeah.
That just proves your credibility.
Yes.
Right there. What it's going to be like to work with you.
Yes, and here's the thing: is the bar is so low today, because things are, You don't even have, I mean, you'll trip over it. The bar is so low.
Well, yeah, and some of it is so bad.
It's
I'm
so
moving you
bad.
to the top of my inbox. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so bad, but that's good news for those who really want to take this seriously, because it really takes very little to stand out because it's just so bad out there. Research tells us that 79% of people never follow up. And I think it used to be 48. And I'm like, no, it's worse than that. But newer research is saying 79%. I believe that.
Yeah.
So that's how bad it is out there.
Yeah, way back in the day when I'd be doing big conferences and stuff, one of my number one clients, she said she'd meet all kinds of people at these conferences, and she said she'd be lucky if one person followed up.
Yeah.
One follow-up.
Yeah.
And it was just like crazy. So I think that what our listeners could really use, Wanda, from you today is what is one thing they could do to just begin that process of creating and building a successful follow-up strategy?
I would say today, or when you're listening this, is you draw a line in the sand and say no more. This is going to be a top priority. I'm going to get my follow-up work done before I spend time on anything else, because that is the work that's going to build your business, bring you more sales. It cannot be pushed aside. And just say, I don't care how uncomfortable I am. I don't care how fearful I am. I'm going to do it, because it's a muscle. And the more you do it, the stronger it gets, the more developed it gets. And most importantly, the thicker your skin is going to get. And you're just going to breeze through your follow-up work every working day. If you committed to that and I came back to you in 1 year, I guarantee you'd tell me your sales are off the charts.
Hallelujah. I'm testifying. Wanda's got it nailed right there. So, yeah. Wanda, is there anything I haven't asked you that you wish I had?
Gosh, we've covered the fears, the priority. I would just say, okay, here's a question. Wanda, which of the 3 fundamentals is the most important one? Mindset, getting a CRM, or making it a priority? Which one is the most important? And I'm going to say, I can't answer that because they're all important. If you were sitting on a 3-legged bar stool and you asked me which leg is most important, I can't answer that question. You know where you are. You know what needs the most attention. What I would say is mindset is very important, because it all starts in between our ears, doesn't it? You can talk yourself into anything or out of anything. So keep a check on the mental chatter.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. And I think it really depends on the individual, which one is the top priority. So,
yeah.
And once again, Wanda, thank you so much for sharing how follow-up strategy can boost success. Will you share with our listeners how and where they can find out more about you?
Oh, thank you. Yes, you can go to my website, followupsalesstrategies.com.
Okay, and I have just dropped that in the chat for everyone. And I want to thank you, Wanda, and I want to thank all of our listeners who tuned in today. I've had so much fun with this conversation. It's been very informative, and I hope you got a lot out of it as well. And Wanda, thank you again. I truly appreciate your joining me today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
What was your biggest takeaway from this episode? I would love to hear about it. It's important to share the things you love. If you loved this episode, a 5-star review really helps keep the podcast coming to you regularly. Also, if you want to get more sales strategies to grow your business, make sure you subscribe right now. If you want to get results even faster, I invite you to download my sales strategy checklist at petitetoqueen.com/checklist. This has been Lynn Whitbeck, host of Claim Your Career Crown. I'll see you next time.